Okay, more RBT practice questions. We're going to do 10 or 11 today. So feel free to jump around, skip around. Um, Email me for the study guide or copies of questions, and I'll try to get those to you. So here we go. Okay, which antecedent increases or decreases the value of a consequence? An abolishing operation, an establishing operation, a motivating operation, or an SD? Okay, so this question is asking for an antecedent that either increases or decreases the value. Okay. So if we were talking about an abolishing operation, we would just be talking about decreases. An establishing operation, we would just be talking about increases. But it's very important to read the questions carefully, okay, because this is asking for both. And in that case, it would have to be a motivating operation because establishing operations and abolishing operations fall under motivating operations. Of course, it's not an SD. An SD signals reinforcements available, but it does not alter the value of a consequence. Only a motivating operation can do that. So the answer, of course, is motivating operation. You're recording the time it takes from the presentation of the demand, or an SD, to the first instance of behavior. What are you measuring? Okay, so think through what kind of measurements we use. Frequency, what is frequency? It's count. Is it we counting anything here? No, we're recording time. Okay, time between two things: the presentation and the first instance of behavior. So it's not frequency. Duration. Okay, are we recording how long a behavior is lasting or how long a response is lasting? No, we're recording the time between two things, right? The demand and the instance of behavior. So it's not duration. Duration is only one behavior, right? Frequencies that count. Duration is only one behavior. Okay, we're recording the time between two different things. So when we're doing that, it has to be latency or IRT. Now remember, IRT is the time between two behaviors. Okay, so it would be the first instance of behavior to the second instance. Okay, that would be your IRT, the time between the end of the first one and the start of the second. Okay, latency is from the demand to the first instance. Okay, so here we're looking for the time between the demand and the first instance, which would be latency. Okay, the breakdown of a task into its individual components and steps. Is that discrete trial, forward chaining, stimulus control, or task analysis? Okay, so when you see something about a task being broken down, a chain, a task chain, any of that, you automatically want to think task analysis. Okay. So when we're looking here, we're breaking down a task into its components and steps. Is that discrete trial? Well, we know that's not discrete trial because discrete trials have nothing to do with breaking down of a task, right? Forward chaining, don't get confused. Now, this is related to chaining, okay? But before we can do chaining, we have to do this step first, right? We first have to break down the task and then we can chain it and teach it using that chain, okay? So don't get that mixed up. It's not forward chaining. Stimulus control has nothing to do with breaking down a task into its individual components. So it has to be D. It has to be a task analysis. When you're looking to teach a chain, okay, before we get that chain, we have to create that chain using a task analysis, okay? And all a task analysis is you're breaking down a task into individual components, okay? Like we talked about before, if I'm breaking down toothbrushing, okay, I'm going to do a task analysis and I'm going to look at each step of toothbrushing, okay? That becomes my chain, 1 through 10 or 1 through 12 or however many steps I find in my analysis, that's my chain. Okay. So the actual breaking down of a task is a task analysis. The teaching is the chaining part. Okay. Task analysis. Examples are food, water, sex, and sleep. Okay. So now this is a good teaching point question because on the exam, they'll ask you questions like this to try to trip you up. Okay. Because you might look at this and say, all right, food, water, sex, sleep. Well, I know those can be consequences. They can be reinforcers. They can be preferred. So I'm looking at my answers and I have secondary reinforcement, primary reinforcement, SD, consequences. Can these be SDs? Yeah. Can they be consequences? Yeah. Are they always SD or consequences? No. So you're always looking for the best answer. Okay. So you want the best answer on the test because they'll give you curveballs like this where two or three might look correct, but there's only one best answer. So what's our best answer here? Okay. They're not always SDs, they're not always consequences. What are they always? Well, what's the difference between a secondary reinforcer and a primary reinforcer? A secondary reinforcer is learned. Okay. That's like money or tokens. Okay. Through pairing and teaching, you learn, okay, to be reinforced. Okay. Primary reinforcement, it doesn't require any learning. Okay. With enough deprivation, these things will become reinforcing. If you go without food for 2 days, food will become extremely reinforcing. Water, same thing. Some people don't like water, but if you don't drink water for 2 days, you're going to crave water. You're gonna be willing to do a lot of work for water. Okay. Same with sex, same with sleep, same with safety and shelter. Okay. So these first and foremost are primary or unlearned reinforcers. Okay. Don't get tripped up if you're stuck between two or three answers or on the test. Pick the best answer. Okay. In this case, food, water, sex, and sleep. The best answer is primary reinforcement. What occurs before the behavior? This should be a very easy question for you. Okay. What occurs before the behavior? You should know this immediately. Is it an antecedent, a response, a behavior, or a consequence? Well, what is the response? Well, the response is a form of the behavior, right? Behavior is the behavior. The consequence occurs when? After the behavior. So, what occurs before? Antecedent. Remember, ABC. Antecedent, behavior, consequence. Okay, this is a very easy question. Don't miss these questions. These should be layups on the test. Okay, what occurs before the behavior? Antecedent. Select the best definition for differential reinforcement from the choices below. So when you read a question like this, before you read the answers, be thinking, asking yourself, what is differential reinforcement? Okay. In your head, you should be thinking through what is differential reinforcement. And this is why going over that study guide I posted is so important because the most important thing going into the test is knowing your definitions. If you're not familiar or you don't know your definitions, the test becomes way harder for this reason. Because if you don't know what differential reinforcement is, you can spend 5-10 minutes trying to figure it out on this question, but you're wasting a lot of time, you're wasting a lot of energy. This question becomes very easy if you know your definitions, if you just immediately know what differential reinforcement is. Okay. So, what is differential reinforcement? Well, it's presenting reinforcement in the presence of one response or behavior and putting all other responses or other forms of that response or different responses on extinction. Okay. So, I'm reinforcing A and then putting everything else on extinction. Okay, so if I know that, we can go into the answer choices knowing what we're looking for. So a stimulus that, when presented following a behavior, causes an overall increase in that behavior over time. Okay, well, that doesn't involve, it involves reinforcement and it involves an increase in behavior, right? But it's not what we're looking for. There's no differential reinforcement going on. There's no extinction going on. There's not two separate things going on. So what is A? A would be reinforcement, right? It causes an overall increase in behavior. So we know A's out. B, providing greater reinforcement for better approximations of a target behavior and placing other behaviors on extinction or on a less desirable reinforcement schedule. That sounds pretty good. What are we doing? We're reinforcing one target behavior or one approximation of the target behavior and replacing other behaviors on extinction. That sounds exactly what we're looking for. Let's go to C, a stimulus that signals the availability of a reinforcer. Okay. Again, are we differentiating here? Are we teaching discrimination? Are we doing anything like that? No. A stimulus that signals the availability of a reinforcer. You should probably know this what it is, but that is an SD, right? An SD signals reinforcements available, not C. D, a stimulus that when presented following a behavior causes an overall decrease. Stop reading there. What is the decrease? Punishment. Okay. What's the answer? B. So how do you get there? First things first, know your definitions. Okay. If you know your definition and before you answer the question, you go through in your mind what you're looking for. This question is very easy. Okay. You have to know your definitions. Other thing, always read every answer choice. Even if you see B and you're like, well, that's 100% it. Read C and D because remember, you're not sure. You're looking for the best answer. So maybe B is a good answer, but D is a better answer. In this case, B is the best answer, but be sure you read every answer and then pick which one you think is best. Okay, so the answer here is B. For a child who is always picked up when they cry, not picking them up in the future would be an example of escape, elopement, extinction, negative reinforcement. So if you're always picking up a child when they cry and then you're told don't pick them up when they cry, what is the best answer here? Was that escape? Well, think about who the learner is or what behavior we're looking at. We're looking at the behavior of, let's assume, the parent. Okay. A parent picking up a child to stop crying, that's actually a form of escape by the parent, right? They're trying to escape the crying. If they're not picking them up, are they escaping? No, right? It's the opposite. Okay. They're not escaping. Okay. So it's not a elopement. There's no elopement going on, right? There's nobody running away. Um, again, like we just said, there's no escape, so it can't be B. Extinction. Now, it's not specified in the question, right? Are we reinforcing that behavior? But for the test, you can assume if this is the answer choices and this is what they're giving you, that picking them up, right, is reinforcing. So if we always pick them up and then we stop picking them up, what have we done? We've cut off their access to reinforcement, right? We've cut them off. What are we doing? We're now putting that behavior on extinction. Okay. D, negative reinforcement. What is negative reinforcement? Okay. It's when you take something away, okay, to increase behavior. Interesting. So if this question was to say, for a child who is always picked up when they cry, not picking them up increases crying, or not picking them up in the future increased crying. Okay. So what are we taking away? We're taking away picking them up. And if that's increasing the crying, then potentially that could be negative reinforcement because we're taking something away and the behavior is increasing. But in this case, right, we're cutting off their reinforcement. Okay. We're not picking them up. The behavior is on extinction. Okay. So the answer here is extinction. A child is taught to raise their hand as an alternative to yelling out in class. What type of differential reinforcement does this example represent? These are going to be one of the hardest questions on the test, the specific differential reinforcement questions. Okay. You're just going to have to be very familiar with them. Okay. DRA, DRO, DRI. So what are we looking at here? Let's look at our answer choices are all differential reinforcements. So what's happening? We're teaching a child to raise their hand as an alternative to yelling out in class. Now, of course, this kind of gives it away because alternatives in the question. But let's just think about our two behaviors, raising their hand and yelling out. Can you do those things at the same time? Yes, I can raise my hand and still yell out. Okay. But if I'm only reinforcing hand raising and not yelling, then what am I doing? Well, I'm reinforcing the alternative behavior. Okay. So C is our answer. Why is it not A? Well, because these behaviors aren't incompatible, right? If you were teaching a child to whisper instead of yell, well, that's incompatible, okay? Because you can't whisper and yell. You're only reinforcing a soft voice, not a loud voice. Those are incompatible. If you're teaching differential reinforcement of other behaviors, that would read something like you reinforce every time the child isn't yelling. Okay, so we're not specifying anything except the absence of yelling. Okay, but that's not the case here. We're teaching an alternative. Okay, and then differential reinforcement of lower rates of behavior. If we are trying to slowly decrease the amount of yelling and you're reinforcing for only yelling 5 times and then yelling 3 times, then maybe it's for lower rates. Okay, but we're not doing that. We're teaching an alternative. Okay, and we're reinforcing that alternative over the other one. In this case, we're reinforcing raising hand over yelling out. Therefore, it has to be C. Extremely bright lights, freezing temperature, electric shock are all examples of what kind of punisher? Okay. Conditioned, unknown, unconditioned, or secondary. All right. So this should be an easy question. Okay. Just think about our earlier question about food and sleep and water, right? Those are all things we're born needing. Okay. Now think about electric shock. Okay. Are you born being punished by electric shock? Yes, right? If you every time you do something, you're giving an electric shock, you're going to probably stop doing that thing or that behavior is going to decrease. Okay. You don't need to learn that electric shock is bad. It's just always going to affect you in that way. Okay. So it's not conditioned. Remember, conditioned is you're pairing it, right? Or you're teaching it through pairing. And we don't need to pair electric shock or freezing temperature with anything. Okay. Those alone are punishing. Okay. There's no pairing going on. Unknown? No. Unconditioned? Yes, that's what we're looking for, right? These are unconditioned, okay? They act alone. There's no pairing going on. They're unconditioned. Secondary? Okay. Secondary is the same thing as conditioned, okay? And then unconditioned would be primary. Okay, so that's good to know. Unconditioned and primary, secondary and conditioned, okay? In this case, freezing temperature, electric shock, there's no conditioning going on, okay? It's a primary punisher, right? So in this case, it would be unconditioned. If you become aware that a client's legal rights are being violated, which of the following actions should you take? All right, so ethical question, okay? Ethical questions probably burn more people on the exam than they should. Don't let them burn you. If you are confused on an ethics question, my advice is always go to the extreme. Okay. Um, because a lot of our ethical code, a lot of it is very strict, right? A lot of it is very, very specific and very stringent. So if you don't know the answer, just go to the extreme. Okay. But hopefully you're gonna know the answer. A lot of it's just common sense. So in this case, if you become aware that a client's legal rights are being violated, which of the following actions should you take? Should you contact relevant authorities? Yeah. Follow organization policies? Yes. Consult your supervisor? Yes. So D, all of the above. Okay. You always want to follow policies. You are a mandated reporter, so you have to report what you see or what you know. And then you always want to consult with your supervisor when something doesn't feel right. Okay, that's what they're there for. You should have a good line of communication with your supervisor. You should feel comfortable going to them and communicating with them. Okay, so if you see something that you don't like, go to your supervisor immediately. Okay, and you need to report that, not only to cover yourself, right, but something might actually be going on. So maybe you're protecting your client or protecting whoever. Okay, but all of the things are going on. If you see something abuse or somebody's legal rights being violated, you need to do all of these things. Okay, you're a mandated reporter, and our code of ethics says you must. Okay, so the answer here is all of the above. A client gives you a bottle opener from their birthday party. What does the ethical code say you should do? Okay, again, another ethics question. This one is regarding gifts. Okay, what does the ethical code say about gifts? It says we cannot accept them. Full stop. Okay. It's a very stringent gift policy. You're not allowed to accept gifts. All right. So, A, refuse the gift and send a letter home that forbids future gift giving. Okay. You should refuse the gift, but should you send a letter home that forbids future gift giving? Maybe. Is there something better we can do? Let's see. Accept it and use it in front of them and make them feel good? No, you shouldn't accept it. So B is out. C, politely decline and explain to them, their parents, the nature of your professional relationship. I like that one, right? No, I'm sorry, I can't take it. Um, I have to maintain this level of relationship, or we're not allowed to accept gifts. Something polite, something friendly, just letting them know one where you stand without being rude. Okay. D, throw it away immediately. No, don't do that. Just politely decline it. Explain the situation. Okay. Very politely. 99% of people understand. Okay. If they don't, contact your supervisor, right? So, but what to learn from here is we aren't allowed to take gifts. Okay, full stop. Now, you have to respect cultural bounds. Okay, so if there's a cultural thing going on, that's something you might want to consult with your supervisor on and then be advised from there because you have to respect others' cultures. Okay, but end of the day, gifts are not deemed acceptable. Okay, all right. So check out my other videos, check out the study guide, email me with any questions, and then I'll be back soon with another set of questions. If you have anything specific, let me know. All right.